Hey, folks, and welcome to the show. This is Counter Clipping, show number 120 for April 17th, 2023. And we are clipping, wrong shoulder, The Crusades from Strategy and Tactics magazine in the 70s. So the counters are quaint, shall we say. These are actually a little bit weird. I might talk about these. These are a glossy finish. I don't know, maybe the previous owner varnished this or something, but it's not the kind of counter finish I would expect from an S&T or SPI game. Tonight's topic is the best of Hex Counter, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. We are drinking a chocolate stout, which doesn't really taste like chocolate, but it does taste kind of like stout. So this way I won't need a separate glass of water down here with me. And hopefully I won't doze off at some point during the show. That would be fantastic. This is not the first magazine game I have clipped on the show. Not usually very many, because usually magazine games in and out, off. We get through it, and that's that. I think Beyond Waterloo, which is 2 counter sheets, took a little extra time, but we did clip that on the show not too long ago. So I forgot to make that note. So before we get started, let's remind everybody to please do thumbs up the video. Please do subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed. We are continuing the process of stream improvements. So you might notice there's some behind the scenes stuff, so maybe you won't notice, but there's some enhancements on the way tonight. So let's get the ticker up. I would like to give a special shout out to new swordsman patron Bob Goddard. Thanks, Bob, and Bjorn Franca, who I think was a patron. I didn't look it up, but who I think had been a patron before, but who has signed back up. So thank you, Bjorn. And thanks to all of the patrons. There'll be a card at the end of the show. That's part of the new show improvements initiative that's happening here. And I'll talk about the big step in that direction that I want to get to with the news. So before we go any further than that, let's say hello to Six Actual, Adam Lee, Alan Salazar, Bayonet Brant from the Armchair Dragons, who somehow managed to break away from his own event to come here tonight. Bill Simone, Bob Moriarty, Brent McCabe, Brian Gash, Cole Bieri, Cyberfield, Marshall, Dale Brady, Ed Holtzman, Failure to Route, fantastic name. HUN 644, Iggy Crichtal, Jack P, Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Edwards, Joe Okabayashi, John Longshore is in the house, John C from the sunny Philippines. We are not sunny here. It was snowing not that long ago. John Clark, Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp, Kyle Reese, Mark McNair, Marty Sample is here, Matt Davidson, McFud Pucker, Meandering Mike, Mike Burnett, Patty Rufesky, Paul West, Stacking Limit, Steve Parker, Stigler is in the house, Tim Greenhaw, Tim Zales, U-Boater 658, Viper Dave, and William Bird. So thanks everybody for coming by and spending your glorious Monday evening with me. Our topic tonight is the best of Hex Counter. Now, we did kind of the best war games of all time, according to BGG a few weeks ago. And it was noticed, shall we say. I mean, I noticed this, of course, and I wasn't surprised. There's like a ton of CDGs and area movement games and light war games on there, just because those are the things that BGG leans toward, right? They show their rating system shows bias toward those games. So if we then take a much stricter approach to exclusively Hex Counter games, we end up with a pretty different list. And no more than a couple of these in the show tonight are going to have made appearances on that previous list. So we'll talk about that. Meanwhile, what's going on? Well, we are continuing to play Last Blitzkrieg. We are into the December 24th turn. That is going well. We are continuing to prep for Buckeye Game Fest, where we will be playing La Bataille de Mont Saint Jean, along with a bunch of other people playing different La Bataille games. And that is happening obviously not this week, but next week. So we will hopefully, should technology permit, be live streaming live from Buckeye Game Fest on that night. I might be doing it at 320p, but we will try to make a show happen from Buckeye Game Fest next Monday night. So be on the lookout for that. And of course, we have Origins coming up in late June. We will be running, I should say, Third World War from Compass at Origins, the big Mondo pack of Third World War. Although I think we're just leaving the Persian Gulf stuff out. I think that's how that's going to work. Now, there's a bunch of nothing newsworthy that I need to show you, but I will certainly mention a number of things that are going on right now. One of which is the Golden Geek Awards over at Board Game Geek. If you are inclined, as I do sometimes, to complain about the lack of representation of war games over at Board Game Geek, this is one of the vehicles by which to change that. So go over and vote for your favorite wargaming stuff. No, I am not a nominee. I have my own choices, and I have shared some of that stuff on social media, but it's a good venue to raise visibility of war games. There has been was there an MMP production update? That was last week. I didn't check that. However, Connections Online, the professional wargaming conference, is in fact going on right now. So there is a link in the video description. So go check that out. There's an events list which you can feel free to browse. And if any of those things appeal to you, you can go check them out. And I think the cost to participate is pretty nominal. Well, I mean, there's pinheads everywhere on the internet, right? Carl Creeder from the Wargame Bootcamp says that Wednesday he'll be driving up to GMT weekend at the warehouse. That sounds awesome. It sounds like a great event. I wish I could go. I wish it wasn't in the middle of California. So that is a problem. Andrew Atkin, welcome back to the stream. Richard DeFortuna, welcome back to the stream. And the legend himself makes a late arrival, Fucko. Last year, well, we did a halfway decent job at Winterfest this year. So we'll see if that actually pans out. And of course, last year I could just drive home and do the show on Monday, and it wasn't a problem. Another thing that is coming up is May Day. For those of us interested in Traveler, this is an online event coinciding with the annual celebration of Traveler that arrives on May Day, May 1st. I have included a link to that in the video description as well. So if you're interested in that, there's a bunch of panels and some games and all that stuff. It's all online. I hope to participate in it, but it is coming right at the tail end of Buckeye Game Fest, so I'll probably tune in toward the end of that, if not for the whole thing. So at least I would like to pop into some of the seminars, which are likely to be interesting. So the big I don't know if we're going to call this personal news or not. So I have complained. This has actually happened at least once during this show, and has happened a number of times at during other activities, where my PC crashes because the monitor is frankly too big for it. So I kind of had resolved myself. I'm just going to put up with this until the correct PC for me goes on sale at the right price. And this week it did, and I went and bought a new PC. We are streaming on the old PC because there was some additional hardware to install, like the 12 gigabyte hard drive to store video on, for example. Plus the extra RAM, which I really feel is going to help, but which I can't get to work. So we're going to continue to try to troubleshoot that. And of course, the several day process of installing and moving everything over. Eric from Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles, thanks for coming by. Jeff Beeler as well, if I didn't get you earlier. So next week, I don't know that I'll have this thing set up for the stream tomorrow with Dan. It would be nice. But, bear in mind, I not only have to get a bunch of stuff installed, but configured. And that one of the main things I got to get configured is OBS, which is what I'm running this whole affair through. So I cannot guarantee that we'll be doing that on the new computer tomorrow, but we should be by next week. So that'll be a huge improvement for me. You probably won't notice any problems unless I have to suddenly stand up in the middle of the stream and piss around with the rebooting the computer or screwing with the video cables or something like that. That's a giant pain in the nuts. So most infuriatingly, I get stressed out every year about doing the taxes. And it's not really that it's going to be a disaster financially. It usually isn't. It's that it's just stressful and there's a deadline and blah, 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 blah. This year, I managed to not get stressed out about the taxes while doing the taxes. Instead, I got stressed out by the 8 times that the computer crashed during the process of me doing the taxes. That is an incredible anxiety amplifier, and I would rather it go the fuck away. So there's that. Now, as an additional reminder, The show on Tuesday night with myself and Dan. We should have a special guest tomorrow. I'm not sure who that's going to be yet, but we'll see. Is on both channels now. So I'm going to stop reminding us about that. TurboTax is on the computer too, Marty. That wouldn't have helped. I use a similar competing product. Let me put it that way. But it's the computer that's the problem, not the software. So in this case, and I don't really have any 3D printing news except that all the design stuff is on pause while I move everything over to the new computer. So anyway, anything else to talk about? No. Best of Hex and Counter. So here's our criteria here, and I decided to be really strict about this. So obviously the map has to be a hex map. Now, if there's like another like side map that's not a hex map, an example of this might be Balance of Powers, which I think has like a rest of the world map that's not a hex map. I thought that was okay. I'm not 100% sure that any of the games on this list are like that. So it had to have a hex map, and it had to have counters, and not blocks, and it could not have cards. And I decided to be super duper strict about it. Even incidental cards, like in U.S. Civil War, do not qualify here tonight. And I felt like that got us a little more interesting list. So no cards, no miniatures, no blocks, no area maps, no point-to-point maps. I did qualify it if there are cards, but the cards are only in an expansion. And there's one example where I got a picture of the version with the cards, but we'll see that when it comes up. And we have 25 games to go through tonight, and we are at about 12 minutes. So we'll see what we get. I do feel like going through these like top lists, especially for publishers that we see a lot of activity from, that we're starting to cover the same games over and over again, and I'm a little tired about that. So and the other thing here is that I only counted one. If there's like a series or tight family of games, I only counted one. And that meant I got deeper into BGG's list than I typically would have for that reason. So I guess I won't surprise anybody by saying there's a number of Mark Simonich operational Zachman games on that list, and I only left the top one. And before I read off the wrong damn thing, let me get rid of this stuff. So let's. Facebook's telling me, or YouTube's telling me now's a great time to insert ads. I really don't want you guys to have to see ads. I hate mid-roll ads, man. Super, super, super irritating. So we start with number 25, The Korean War. This is a classic 1986 game from Joe Balkowski. Now, I pulled this one because this was I did 21 through 25 right before the stream. So I didn't get the new version, the designer signature edition from Compass Games. It's very nice. It's pretty much the same game. I think I think it's reasonable to have reservations about Victory Games components nowadays, but I certainly think the map to the Korean War and indeed almost all the Victory Games, the maps are at least highly usable, even if they aren't highly attractive by today's standards. I can think of a couple that are fairly Omaha Beachhead map is pretty unattractive by today's standards, but it's perfectly usable. Counters less so, although the counters from Korean War aren't too bad. So this is in my opinion, the definitive sort of operational / strategic treatment of the Korean War. Another game that we will see in literally just a minute is also a really good operational treatment of the military aspects of the Korean War, but a lot of those higher level strategic context issues are just not dealt with in that game. This game deals with all of that in a very comprehensive way. It is somewhat complicated. I would call it a high medium complexity game nowadays. It does play fairly quickly. You could easily play this in a weekend. It is a terrific game. And I'm pretty sure that the new version from Compass is still available. Joe Balkowski, of course, remains one of our greatest wargame designers. So I've kind of made choices as to which versions I'm displaying here, but in most cases, I'll talk about that when it comes up. Half-Ass Gaming, welcome back to the stream. Thanks for coming by. Leaping Lemmings. It's not a war game. It might be Hex. It might be Hexes and Counters. I wouldn't know. So I didn't think of where I was putting the glass. I don't want to accidentally drip them on these 50-year-old counters, particularly. So Korean War, highly recommended. I have played this. It is very good. It is, if you're going to have like a one-stop shop Korean War game and you don't have, a particular affinity for a particular series that covers, like the Hold Fast series. There's a Hold Fast Korea, for example. I'm not sure that's one of the more highly regarded games in the Hold Fast series, but there are folks that do like that series. So unless you have a particular affinity to a particular series that has a Korean War game, or you want tactical Korean War, in which case you've got a number of options that didn't make this list. But the obvious one, of course, is ASL Korea, the Forgotten War module that covers Korean War at the squad level. So, and yes, a recent 2020, I think I want to say, maybe might have been 2021, designer signature edition from Compass came out of this. It's the same game. There are no significant changes to it other than an upgrade to the components. Now, I know that Compass made a couple of passes at printing the counters. There were some super duper thick counters that had some super registration problems, and they had to replace those. So I'm not sure what is actually being bundled with the game at this moment, but Compass has always been very good about fixing those kinds of problems. So I have no doubt that even if there's an issue, it'll get sorted out. So, and I will also mention that the Victory Games version is a 2-mapper. One of the things that folks complained about with the Compass version is that it's 4 maps, bigger counters, bigger hexes. That's why. But folks said, "Oh well, now it won't fit on my table." So maybe you got a reason to run down the Victory Games version, which isn't terribly expensive. But the component quality in the Compass version is much higher. Rick Cox, thanks for stopping by. There is like 2 missing counters in this game, which I didn't realize until I sat down and started clipping it, actually, which is a little bit annoying. But at this point, I can just make replacements. Screw it. It's not like these are sophisticated counters, and I do have all the SPI fonts. And it'll be nice to run Inkscape without the computer crashing on me. That'll be great. One of the main impetuses, is that a word? For upgrading was just to upgrade to faster motherboard that would take faster RAM and more RAM. So I'm shooting for 64 gigs of RAM, which ought to help me with applications like the 3D modeling applications and with graphics applications like Inkscape. It probably won't help with video rendering, but the 4070 video card ought to. So I had to turn off video card related or assisted video rendering on this piece of shit because of the legendary blue video phenomenon that was caused by an AMD driver issue. So AMD not recommended. If you have a very narrow focused like gaming PC and all you do on it is play games, then AMD is actually fine. I don't have that. I have all kinds of productivity things and stuff like that I do on this PC. So that doesn't work for me. So I'm not complaining about the taxes as such. I'm just complaining about the stress of doing them. So moving on is James Day. I always want to call him David Day because I used to work with a guy named David Day. James Day's Panzer, and this originally came out from Yaquinto back in 1979. I passed through the hands of Excalibur Games for some reason at some point, and finally landed at GMT. Now, I believe there's been a fair amount of revision between the original Yaquinto edition and the current GMT edition. This has cards. Does it have cards, or does it have just the AFV cards? Because I thought the AFV cards were acceptable. It doesn't have like cards that you deal, right? Which is why that magnificent masterpiece, Desert Fox Deluxe, which includes like OB cards that come into play, why that's of course going to be number 1 on this list. So, I guess I will mention Traveler Tuesday is coming back on Tuesday, and there's an interesting new product. So we'll have that. There's an unboxing video as well that is already uploaded as of earlier today. So we are on target for a minimum number of videos this week. I guess let's go in These are boats. Jeez. Okay, so this is tactical World War II. There is a modern version which has already been mentioned in the chat by Iggy Krichtal. That's MBT, main battle tank. Back in the days of, that's interesting. MBT and its counterpart IDF, or Israeli Defense Force, both of which are modern combat, actually were, well, at least MBT came out through Avalon Hill. And it's a similar system. So this system's kind of been all over the place, but seems to have found a happy home at GMT. I'm happy to say. For those who either don't want to deal, it's a fairly complicated game, but for those who don't really want to deal with ASL, or they're more interested in armor war than they are infantry battles, then this is a series that I would look at. Meandering Mike clarifies that both MBT and IDF were from Avalon Hill. But Panzer never came out through Avalon Hill. That went, I think, at the time that might have been with Excalibur, and then it went to GMT, presumably at the designers, due to the efforts of the designer. Stigler seems to hate the maps on these, and I gotta say, well, they're certainly not the most amazing looking maps I've ever seen. I don't really think there's anything wrong with them. To compare this to, say, the TSR Terrible Swift Sword map, I think is a bit unfair. On the other hand, that was produced in like 1985, and this was produced in the GMT version came out in 2010, something like that, maybe. So maybe that's not a fair comparison. So, but I don't think there's anything really wrong with these maps. The form factor is a little weird, but I don't think they're worse maps than Combat Commanders maps, for example, and nobody seems to be really complaining about those. Well, that's not true. We're wargamers; we can complain about anything, but there doesn't seem to be like a storm of controversy over the Combat Commander maps. Let me put it that way. Certainly, some folks have said that they are not incredibly impressed with them. Todd Cox says that it's really like ASL, but armor and OBA are better in this game. Sure, that's kind of the point. There is infantry in this game. It's not like strictly tanks, but it is focused around armor stuff. So for those who are more interested in the armor, then this is something to take a look at. Now, the One True Flem says that critical hits Tobruk, by which he means, I believe, the advanced Tobruk system, does a better job of armored warfare, but the infantry portion isn't as good. Now, I'm not saying the One True Flem is wrong here. However, it is from critical hit. And let's face it, the critical hit reputation for quality anything is low. So, and maybe that's me being unfair, but they have a well-established reputation of cranking out shit that is unplay tested, unproofread, anything except that it generally looks fairly nice, and is certainly ambitious and large. So I personally, before investigating the advanced Tobruk system, and I'm not really saying I'm going for Panzer here, but if I really wanted an armored World War II armored warfare game at this scale, I would investigate Panzer certainly before I would investigate the advanced Tobruk system. Now, there are some people that like the advanced Tobruk system, and that's fine. I wish them all the delights of playing the advanced Tobruk system. It's not the straight Tobruk system, just so we know. I mean, I know that, but that's just something I don't really want to deal with. All right, next up is piss. I forgot the graphic of Dien Bien Phu. This is a Kim Kanger game from Legion Wargames. I knew I was going to rush through something. This is a Kim Kanger game from Legion Wargames on the Battle of Dien Bien Phu between the French and the Viet Minh in the 50s, 1954, 1955, something like that. I haven't played this. This is from Legion Wargames. It is supposed to be very good. I have seen this on a number of tables already. I apologize about the rushed graphic on this. Hopefully I got the next couple right. But it's a nice looking cover too. But this, god damn it. John Stanley says 1954. I've got a book on it that I haven't read yet. The original Tobruk was Avalon Hill, and somehow my understanding is the Critical Hit somehow managed to license the name and or system, and that's why they went with the advanced Tobruk system. And it's clearly positioned as a competitor to ASL. I'm not sure competitor is the right word. But it is clearly positioned to occupy a similar space as ASL. And bluntly, I don't think it's as good a game. And I don't think Critical Hit, to be honest, I mean, Critical Hit got kind of started doing third party ASL stuff, right? And I mean, I'm happy to accept argument about this, but it's my opinion that Critical Hit was the dead last worst ASL third party content publisher that at least of their stuff that I saw. So no thanks. So moving on from Dien Bien Phu, since I don't even have a picture to riff off of here, is the first and only OCS entry, one entry per series here, though. Although this is the highest rated entry in the series, or highest ranked, I should say, entry in the series, which I found fairly interesting. Korea: The Forgotten War from, is this a Hans Kischel design? I can't read it from here, and I didn't look that up. But obviously, series designed by Dean Essick. I have played this. It's terrific. I like it a lot. It's also a pretty good introductory game to OCS. It starts out pretty small and then gradually escalates and escalates and escalates until there's more stuff on the map. It never reaches the heights of density that an OSU that an OCS East Front game, or really even a West Front game, would. But it starts you out nice and easy. I will say, however, that you have a lot of pressure on you at the beginning as the North Korean player, because you have to achieve a certain thing, or a condition arises that if you don't push the opposing forces back behind the Busan perimeter, then you have this status that comes into play that massively disadvantages you as the North Korean. Hi, Vicky. Thanks for stopping by. Iggy Kricktal heard that Victory Games Korean War was better than OCS Korea. I mean, I've played them both. They're pretty different. If you just want the military part of it, then OCS Korea is really, really good. It comes with all the OCS stuff, right? With the supply and the extenders and all that stuff. So if you like all that, then you're probably going to have a really good time with Korea: The Forgotten War. If you want some simulation factors that factor into play international opinion and tension with the communist powers and Soviet intervention, although that can happen in Korea: The Forgotten War, it's unlikely to in Korea: The Forgotten War, but it's possible. There's counters in the game for this. That kind of thing is modeled, and a lot of other geopolitical factors are modeled in the Victory Games Korean War that are simply not dealt with here, because this is an operational war game, and not an attempt to simulate all the dimensions of the conflict. The Victory Games Korea wants to do that to a much greater extent. And so it's a pretty different game. So I think it to some extent is a bit of an apples and oranges comparison. Yes, OCS Korea does have the amphibious landings in Incheon. In fact, that happened in our game, as I recall. I don't know that there's any special rules for it. I think it just uses the standard out of the box OCS amphibious invasion rules, which are not that great. But Perfidious Albion says that the more he was playing ATS, the more he felt like he was playing minis, which is fine since they play in with GHQ minis. Cool, I guess. And it might be easier to play. I don't know. Tony from Tony's Board Life loves the advanced Tobruk system. I think he's crazy, but I wish him all the luck in the world playing it. So, and when, as John C points out, when MMP has a sale, this is inevitably on sale for some very inexpensive price. I don't know why they can't get rid of this. It's very good. It's a good introductory OCS game. It's just on a topic that a lot of people aren't nearly as interested in as they are interested in the traditional space of OCS on the East Front of World War II, right? We've got a not exactly perfectly square counter here, shall we say. I was tempted to bust out the deluxe for that one. ID Jester, thanks for stopping by. You have failed the test. So sorry about that. Steve Parker says reluctant enemies can have one bad combat result cripple one side. Yeah, that's true. But that's really only a function of the size of reluctant enemies, to be honest. I mean, there's like no forces to make up the difference with in reluctant enemies, right? Um, so not Korea, not a hugely popular topic, but we've felt that ASL needed a Korea module, and there's a number of Korea games that have come out more recently than this, including the designer signature edition. But I have both of those games. They're not going anywhere. I think they're both outstanding games. So, whoops, wrong direction. Next up is Downtown. This is by Lee Brimacum Wood from GMT. This is another one of those loosely affiliated series of games that are related, but not exactly all the same, nor is there a series rulebook or anything like that. This is the air war over Hanoi, I think 68 to 72, as I recall. This has been an enduringly popular game. Now, this is described sometimes as an operational air game, and I think that's true, but there are also some tactical elements in it as well. So it's not a purely Stig was going to argue with me about this. It's not a purely operational game. It sort of straddles the line, but it's more operational than it is tactical. Tim Zales points out that it is rare. I don't know that it's rare, but it's certainly expensive. So there is talk of a reprint, but Lee Brimacum would like to get some other projects nailed down first. And then there's talk of a new edition of Downtown. This goes for a big chunk of dough on the secondary market, $200 to $300, generally speaking. So is my focus okay? Or is it, I mean, it could be my glasses. My glasses are just filthy. I turned, for Pete's sake, I turned autofocus off on this camera and it's still autofocusing. Ed Holtzman is correct about this. He says operational planning, tactical execution. It's not super tactical, but yes, that is where the tactical elements come into play. And these are very highly regarded games. Topically, I'm not super interested in this in particular, although Vietnam is one of those topics that the more I read about, the more I do want to dabble in gaming it. But I'm not super interested in doing that at the tactical level. And there's honestly at the operational level, there's not much. There's a little bit. There's Year of the Rat. There's Sealers of the Mekong Delta. There's a Hot Dry Season available from pre-order on Legion Wargames site, which is terrific. Playthrough video of that. Go check that out. People are just scared of the map. I'm pretty sure that's all it is. It's the map is unconventional. It's a Hex Counter game, but the map is unconventional. And of course, Silver Bayonet from GMT. And at the sort of strategic level, sort of the same sort of top to bottom level that one sees in the Korean War, we have, of course, Nick Karp's Vietnam game, which didn't make this list, but it's one of those games. There's really nothing else like it. It is the best. It's complicated, it's long, and if you play the entire 11-year campaign, it's going to take you forever. But you're probably gonna be bored at least at parts of it, but you're going to get a really good simulation out of that game. So and there are scenarios as well. So there's a whole family of these, which include things like Red Storm and Bloody April, the GMT Bloody April, not the SPI Bloody April. I hate that. That are broadly similar but different in a lot of the details. Another one that is, again, broadly similar but differs in a lot of the details is the Burning Blue, which I forget who the designer was on that. It might have been Lee Brimacum Wood. That's the Battle of Britain. I've got that. It looks really, really good. Prophecy Albion says the nature of how Downtown plays is like the Burning Blue. You only play 1 day's operation. This is difficult as Rolling Thunder and Linebacker 2 takes several weeks or more. Yes, that's a good point. Whereas in the Burning Blue, you do it day by day. So Elusive Victory is Arab-Israeli war, operational air, semi-operational air. And I actually had that passed through my hands, and twice actually it passed through my hands. I won it in a raffle and sold it or traded it, and then I bought it cheap and then sold it or traded it. So I got, I did okay on it, but um, Arab Israeli conflict is just not my thing. So I was just topically not interested in that. So Burning Blue is another one in the. I won't call them a series because I don't think they're tightly. I don't think they're similar enough to warrant being called a series. I think it is fair to call them a family of games, of which Lee Birmingham Wood has done several, but not all of them. I think Bloody April was by a different designer, for example. So moving on from downtown is Men of Iron. Now, this is a 2005 release from GMT. Of course, more recently available in the value packed Men of Iron Tri Pack, which I believe is out of print right now, but which is on P500 to get a reprint. I Perfidy's Albion, I maybe I stumbled over it, but yes, Burning Blue is the Battle of Britain. And it is a sister game in the family to Downtown for clarity's sake. I think we're getting Elusive Victory and Burning Blue mixed up. Elusive Victory was pretty easy to find for a while, but it doesn't seem to be anymore. It actually goes for um, a decent chunk of change now too. Not as much as Downtown though. I feel like from just like what I've read about that conflict, the air war over Hanoi in that period, I do feel like you would get a good air game out of that. Let me put it that way. Okay, so I'm showing you the picture of the Men of Iron tri-pack, which is a tremendous value package. Okay. It includes 3 games: Men of Iron, Infidel, and Blood and Roses. Men of Iron proper is mostly 100 Years War stuff. Blood and Roses is Wars of the Roses stuff, and Infidel is Crusades stuff. I have played a couple of these battles. This is excellent. This is a Richard Berg series. There are 4 volumes in the series right now. The 4th is Arquebus, not included in this set, which is battles from the Italian Wars. Very interesting battles, actually. And there's a 5th volume in the series on P500 called Norman Conquests by another designer after the passing of the legendary Richard Berg. Steve Parker says it didn't seem to have a period combat feel. I did not necessarily agree. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that there's some real good battles in here too, by the way. And certainly for for this kind of sort of infantry forward, there's certainly cavalry in the game as well, but for this sort of infantry forward medieval battles, um I think this is my first stop personally. Now, others with more of an eye for detail might want something more detailed. Um, so Greg Grant has mentioned this. Now, it turns out that as much as I've been saying, I don't own any games on the Israeli Wars, I never have. That's actually bullshit. I do actually have a copy of October War. So it shows you how much attention I've paid to that. But that game actually has quite a good reputation. So I may end up busting that out too. However, he is correct in saying that we will play Valley of Tears when the BCS Arab Israeli Wars game comes out. And that should be hitting, I almost said P500. That should be hitting the MMP pre-order system pretty soon. I will pre-order that. So, Men of Iron, well worth your time. At this point, the best, even if you have to wait for it, I'd say the best course on this one is to wait for the reprint of the tri-pack, or hover around waiting for one to show up at a good price. It shouldn't be going for a ruinous price. It hasn't been out of print for all that long, and it's already on the fast track to get reprinted. So Joe Perez says there's a lot of good stuff in the downtown box, but some of them may be missing maps. So yeah, Arab Israeli Wars is just a topic I'm not terribly interested in. I can't follow everything, right? And Lord knows there's enough topics that I am following, so I'm resistant at this point to getting into new ones. But I do feel like I'm not really going to need to buy anything else on the topic. Although, if I really wanted an air game on the topic, Elusive Victory would be the one for me anyway, to get. Usually, Jeff Beeler, there actually is no Facebook person. There is one Facebook person watching right now. So usually there's a person on Facebook, a person on Twitch, and everybody else is on YouTube. So next up, did I manage to God damn it. There we go. Okay, number 19 is the Third World War. Now, the one that falls into the ranking on this is the original, the Third World War Battle for Germany from 1984 and Game Designers Workshop. But I've chosen to use the picture of the new edition from Compass because you can actually get that. Um, I will say this game did have cards, but the cards were limited to Persian Gulf, which was a standalone game, and not Battle for Germany. None of the other three games had cards. You do get the cards if you want to buy this big fancy combo pack from Compass, and it is very nice. Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. Thanks for stopping by. Can Men of Iron be played solo? Absolutely. You can 100% play Men of Iron solitaire. There's no explicit solitaire mechanism, but there's also no hidden information, as I recall. So, um, Tim Zale says that The War is a beautiful classic. Yeah, really nice job on this all around from John Krantz and the TWW design or development or whatever they're called, team that put this together over at Compass. They did a really nice job. I will say I do have one complaint, and it's not a big complaint, but it would actually save Compass, I think, a little bit of money. Instead of the hit counters, so this uses you put these hit counters under units to reflect that they have taken combat hits, and that degrades their I forget what the number is, like combat efficiency or something like that. And that's a hugely important factor in how well the unit actually performs, and that degrades over time, right? So you put these hit markers under it, and they're numbered chits. So there's a one chit, a two chit, a three chit, and of course they're double sided. So you get like one on the front, two on the back, or whatever it is. I actually feel like the pollard markers, the rotating pollard markers, are more efficient for this. And had this game contained the Compass version contained half-inch counters, I actually have more than enough pollard markers, like extra pollard markers, laying around from various MMP products that I could have just swapped them in. But they're 9/16 inch counters, and I don't have any extra 9/16 inch pollard markers. I'm not sure I have any 9/16 inch pollard markers actually. So unless I wanted to make them, I'm stuck with the hit markers. Now, the reason this is more efficient is you basically only need one or maybe two per unit. And you would have saved printing a lot of counters, a lot of hit markers, maybe a whole counter sheet, maybe even two counter sheets less than you actually got in this game. So I think that would have been more efficient from a play standpoint and a printing efficiency standpoint. I was not consulted. And the hit markers are exactly how it was done back in the day with GDW. And I know a lot of folks don't like the pollard markers. I'm not a huge fan of the pollard markers either, but I have played with them in a number of games, and they're really not as big a hassle as they might seem like they are. So they don't bug me too much. Um, so So Paul West says that we'd be in a tight spot as wargamers if Compass didn't exist. Well, I don't know about tight spot as such, but certainly they're bringing, among, Compass Games originals that I think happen to be very good games. They are also bringing back and helping to popularize other companies bringing back a number of classic war games that deserve to, still be in print. And this is one of them. So Perfidious Albion is wondering about the context of the Third World War being set in 1985 based off the rules in the revised NATO game. There were options for 1989. So there are two. So if we're talking about NATO, the Cold War goes hot. The Bruce Maxwell game, which is also coming back out in a new edition from Compass, which unlike this one, which has really just been given a very light tightening and a graphical overhaul, the NATO game is not a total redesign, but it's a very substantial redesign. So the two systems are not related at all, and I'm not sure that's what you're trying to say here. I actually don't think it is, but somebody might read the comment and think that. One criticism that this game has fallen to when it got reprinted is that they did not do any updates. Bruce Maxwell did tons of additional research on the orders of battle and all that stuff for his revision of NATO. They didn't do any of that for this. You got the same order of battle that they had when this thing released in 1984. Some people had a problem with that. I don't, but I certainly would like the option to play with an updated OB and or say 1989 scenarios or whatever. those things might be coming in an expansion pack. In the meantime, I've played the original of this. Our game of it at Origins will be our first time playing with this particular set. But again, it's pretty much the same game. So I have every confidence that we'll have a great time, just like we did last time we played it. And we have room in that game. So myself and a buddy are running it. So you should definitely sign up if you're going to be at Origins. And you're not signing up for the whole thing. You're signing up for 4-hour slots. If you want to hang around for 4 hours or 8 hours or whatever, that's great. If not, you sign up for one and then walk away at the end. So you can get a chance to see it if nothing else. And I've heard this too. Carl mentions that they did say they were going to do an updated order of battle and additional non-1985 scenarios in an expansion. But we don't have any official word. I mean, we do, but I talked to those guys at Compass Expo, and they're working on stuff. We just don't have like a pre-order for any of that yet, right? So I'm not sure exactly where that is in the production queue. Let me put it that way. Prophetic Albion says that the Soviet army in 85 was a more professional army. Troops had to honor their draft period of 3 years, and they had a solid cadre of NCOs. This is simply absent in 2022, and the Warsaw Pact is now NATO. Okay, I think I see what you're trying to say there. This is about the current conflict in Ukraine and the apparent Russian pants shitting that is occurring. That is not our topic tonight. I am not qualified to talk about that in any meaningful sense, so I'm not going to. All right, next up is number 18. This is Ted Racer's entry onto the list, possibly his only entry, but I'm not sure I remember. This is the Dark Valley. This is the East Front campaign. This is a 2-map game. There's 2 different printings of it from GMT. The second of which I'm pretty sure has a mounted map in a 3-inch box, which is always nice to see. I had the first printing of this. And I dumped it and then just haven't gotten around to getting the second printing yet. This is an excellent game. It is a chit pull system in which the pool itself evolves over the course of the game to model the changes in doctrine and effectiveness that happened to both the German and Soviet armies in this conflict. It works extremely well. We were very happy with it. I will say you've got a lot to do as the German player. The victory conditions are constructed in such a way as to put all the pressure on the German player to conduct a really successful Operation Barbarossa. So if you lag behind, you're going to lose the automatic victory conditions in early 1942. But presuming you can meet or beat those victory conditions, which are pretty close to the historical progress, then you're going to be fine. So this particular model, again, this is more of a family than a series because the rules aren't that similar, has now hit another couple of games. There's the Dark Sands, which is North Africa. There's the Dark Summer, which is Normandy, which is up there. There's the Deadly Woods from Revolution Games, which is the Battle of the Bulge. The only other one in the series that I have looked at is the Dark Summer. I keep want to call it the Dark Shore. There is a Normandy game, I believe, called the Dark Shore. Maybe it's the Far Shore. And I want to say that was a John Shetler game for 3W back in the day. Vince Ree has the non-deluxe version of the Dark Valley. I would probably go for the upgrade in this case, not for the mounted maps, but for the revisions. But I would also I would also tell you to take a look at what those revisions are. Ted, I don't have that. Red Storm over the Reich. Yeah, and he also did the Fall of the Third Reich, I believe it's called, from Compass as well. And that's a fairly interesting game. That's one of those 43 to 45 games, so it eliminates a lot of the early war stuff that you otherwise have to balance around. I don't think that's a chip pull game, though. I have that. I haven't really looked at it that closely. It does have randomized unit strengths, and unlike a lot of those where that's persistent, I believe it's rolled every time the unit fights. It's actually a table. The Deadly games there's only one to my knowledge so far, the Deadly Woods. But that is in the related family, yes. Carl says that he thought the Dark Summer was very good. It looks good, and Normandy is one of my favorite topics. So So this is worth your time. This can be played in a long weekend also, I think. So it plays, once you know what you're doing, it plays relatively quickly while still being fairly big. It's a 2-map game. All right, moving on is Band of Brothers from Worthington Games. Now, there's some kind of relationship between this and some other series, and I keep saying that and I keep getting it wrong, so I'm not going to say it this time. So I'm not sure what that's all about, but this is, part of a series of games from Worthington that's fairly well regarded. This is tactical, I believe, squad level World War II. It's a very crowded space. This has managed to carve a place out in that very crowded space. So good for it. Other than that, this is one when I was on that grand tour of World War II tactical games a few years ago. This is one that I did not play. I made an effort to play as many as I could, and I just missed this one. Maybe because convinced it was the same game as Lock and Load Tactical or something else. So I don't have a lot to say about this. It's certainly nice, as is everything. I mean, physically, it's nice, as is everything from Worthington. So if you like Worthington or you're looking for a squad level alternative, maybe check a light, very light squad level alternative that's lighter than, say, Lock and Load Tactical, and probably lighter than Conflict of Heroes as well. Next up is Flying Colors. This is by Mike Nagel. This is a whole series of standalones. There are 3 volumes in the series right now. Flying Colors itself, which is available in a deluxe edition from GMT, which is the version to get because it's got a bunch of scenarios that were included in C3I included in it, as well as the expansion that is also and its scenarios are also included in that deluxe edition. Now, there's another game called Serpents of the Seas, which I believe is the American Revolution. There's some American Revolution battles in the core game too. And there's a third one called Blue Flag, White Ensign, or something like that. I've got it. It's the Great Northern War and kind of stuff like that. Age of Sail battles with the Swedes and the Russians. It actually looks pretty interesting, but it's not a incredibly popular game. It's been sitting around for quite a while over at GMT. It might be gone now. I'm not sure. Vlad C, thanks for stopping by. Welcome to the stream. A gaming buddy of John C in the sunny Philippines. Thank you for your glorious weather, however glorious it is back down there. So lots of folks want to compare Flying Colors to the classic Wooden Ships and Iron Men. And there's good reason to make that comparison, but the two games are at kind of different scales, right? Wooden Ships and Iron Men is really a ship game. You're playing a ship. And while you can handle 2 or maybe 3 ships, beyond that, it gets to be a little too much to handle. Maybe 4 in Wooden Ships and Iron Men, maybe 2 in the close action from Clash of Arms. Flying Colors is really kind of a squadron game. There's rules to kind of pad it out if you're just playing small engagements, but it's really kind of a squadron game, and it is tuned for that. So as Flying Colors points out, this is the game in which you can play Trafalgar without necessarily taking up a gymnasium floor to do it, right? Joe Perez never played the Dark Valley, but played the Dark Summer with a longtime gaming pal. Conceded as the Allies after a few turns. He thought he couldn't win. The German player thought he couldn't lose. So that's probably a good sign in a Normandy game, right? The German, I mean, realistically, the pressure's on the Germans, right? And Ted was very good in the Dark Valley of putting the pressure not on the Soviets. I mean, the Soviets got to perform well too, and I won as the Soviets when we played. But there's a lot more pressure on the Germans that they have to attack and execute correctly, and they have to make gains at a certain rate and level. And I would suspect that the Dark Summer is set up the same way, and that's a very good piece of design on Ted parts, in my opinion. Steve Parker says Wooden Ships and Iron Man is wildly different and having to plan the moves. Yes, that's absolutely true. But he also says Flying Colors is too dependent on who wins initiative. That may be true, but I'm not gonna I'm going to say I don't think that's terribly important in this particular case. So, so Flying Colors, excellent series. There's another one on P500 right now, which is the various South American wars during the Age of Sail. That also looks quite interesting. Next up, we keep hitting the wrong button. Next up is the Venerable Russian campaign, which we have talked about plenty around here. This is John Edwards' design, originally released from Jedco in 1974. Very shortly thereafter, went to Avalon Hill, where it got this iconic Roger McGowan cover. There are now 2 editions of it out, one from Compass Games, which is a reissue of the original Jedco version, and then one from GMT, which just came out just a couple of months ago, which is a quote unquote 5th edition, which is it's closer to the Avalon Hill version, but also includes a large number of additional options, variants, additional scenarios, and articles and stuff that you can monkey with the game with. So, in addition, it's an incredibly influential game that has influenced a large number of other games, including Russian Front, for example, and probably the Dark Valley as well. The Compass Games, I believe Art Lupinacci designed Russia Besieged is a descendant of this. There is actually an article, or I think part 1 of a 2-part article by Art in the latest issue of War Diary magazine, kind of going through all the different Russian campaign family games, including all the different versions of Russia campaign, plus Russia Besieged. And that is a well worthwhile article to read. They sent me a PDF of the issue, and I just never got to actually doing a video on it. But I did read that article, and it's very good. And War Diary is worth your time, actually. Marty says he liked Dark Valley a lot, but was not so much with Dark Sands. Doesn't like Dark Summer, didn't bother with Deadly Woods. I was not super into Dark Sands because I feel like I've got more than enough stuff on North Africa at this point. I've got like 6 North Africa games, and that is just a little bit over my interest level in North Africa. So obviously I need to go buy the campaign for North Africa for $700 or $800 anytime now. That sounds like a fabulous idea. So Russia campaign, hugely influential classic, still gets played today. Fortunately, it's super easy to get now because you can just go buy it from Compass or GMT, or probably still people asking $100 for it on eBay. Don't pay that. But this is worth your time, and even if you end up at the end saying, I think this other game is better, whether that's Russia Besieged or No Retreat the Russian, or whatever it is, or Hold Fast East Front, whatever that's called, I think you will have gotten a valuable experience out of Russian campaign either way. So that's why it is on my playlist for some time in 2023, looking like back of end of 2023, to be honest. Stacking Limit says he loved Deadly Woods and Dark Summer. Next up is Pacific War from Mark Herman, originally released from Victory Games in 1985 and reissued in 2022 by GMT in a supersized box, which includes super thick counters, mounted maps, and not enough room in the box. So we spent about 3 months with this very shortly after it came out, and we're pretty impressed with it. The GMT version has some light revision across the entire game. There's just a few things that got tweaked here and there, and then a completely rewritten set of rules for subs. There are some complaints about the rules for subs. I suspect that the folks who had the problems with the subs were doing it wrong, which we were. And then we read it more carefully, and we realized, hey, we cocked this up. That's why subs are super overpowered, because we were doing it incorrectly. I don't want to say all Mark Herman games, but like a lot of Mark Herman games, you really do have to read the rules thoroughly and carefully. The rule book, when people ask questions, 99.5% of the time, Mark's response is it's in the rule book, and he's probably aggravated by it. And he is right. It's in the rule book. It does reward repeated play and careful study of the rules. This is a really one-of-a-kind game. There's nothing really quite like this. It is really a true operational Pacific War, land, air, naval simulation that allows you to play a variety of different situations from very small and I'm talking about the campaigns, right? From relatively limited, relatively short session campaigns, all the way up to the entire Pacific War. The strategic scenario, as it's called in the game, which is the whole war, and there's actually a couple different variants of it now in this new edition. I think there might have been two different ones in the original. The I think this is an overstatement. Perfidious Albion, by the way, he says that comparing flying colors to wooden ships and Iron Men is like comparing Starfleet battles to Full Thrust. For one thing, Full Thrust is a miniatures game, a straight miniatures game, and it's pretty simple and nothing like Starfleet battles. Well, it's pretty simple in comparison to Starfleet battles. I think wooden ships and Iron Men and flying colors are closer than that. Let me put it that way. I think you'd have a better point between flying colors and close action. Close action is closer to Starfleet battles, and in fact feels a little bit like Starfleet battles when you play it. So it's hard to recommend Pacific War because it's a project, right? You're handing the person that you're telling this to a project. They're going to have to invest a substantial amount of time learning this game, and then executing it even competently, right? There are trivial mistakes that you can make that are hard to retroactively fix and which will screw you up bad if you make them, and that can be problematic in a larger scenario. And again, I'm not talking about up to the whole war. I'm talking about in like the one early war scenario where it's like a 6-month scenario where the Japanese run wild. That's a huge scenario that would take a lot of time to play, and you don't want somebody making just a dumb bonehead mistake 4 hours in, and then you got to reset it, or worse, 20 hours in. So it really is a masterpiece. There's really nothing quite like it. The only thing that really compares to it at all is War in the Pacific. And I guess you can say that about the decision games War in the Pacific, but I believe that game to have been a simple mistake. I'm really talking about the SPI War in the Pacific, and frankly, this is a better game. This actually got play tested, for example, and War in the Pacific, they admitted that they only ever play tested the one scenario. So, and I think there's some interesting things going on more in the Pacific that I do like and I'm interested in. That's why I've got it. But Pacific War is a finished, polished masterpiece. It is really, really good, but man, you better be super into it because it's gonna suck up a lot of time and mental bandwidth. Now, it does have built-in learning ladder, right? Where you can start with the engagement scenarios that are just like these really limited, often solitaire exercises, move up to the battle scenarios, which are interesting on their own. But you'll want to move up to the campaign scenarios. The structure of play is organized around operations, which you pay command points to undertake. Okay. And you only really get to that in the campaign game. The battle scenario is a single operation. It's already paid for. Here's what you got. Go do your stuff and then come back to port. It's pretty much that simple. Perfidious Albion. So I want to be clear about this. Perfidious Albion says that this Pacific War can be a total monster to play and really requires a very experienced war gamer, but Empire of the Sun is probably better for most people and easier to understand contextually. Yes, I completely agree with that statement. I frankly suspect Mark would agree with that statement. And I do think that a very experienced war gamer, to some extent, that can be a liability, actually. Pacific War is different, right? Pacific War, there's not a lot to compare it to. It's not really similar to anything else, right? It's a lot like BCS in that respect, in that I feel like our new guy is actually in some ways having an easier time learning BCS because he doesn't have all the baggage with zones of control and all this other stuff that we've been doing for years. So to some extent, that's probably true, but I think it's less true here than it is with BCS. I do think you want some wargaming experience here. I do think if your previous knowledge of the Pacific War is limited to Empire of the Sun, you might end up being confused because there's a lot of the same underlying logic between the two, but the Pacific War is way more detailed in every respect. Wade Moore asked if it needed mounted maps. It did not. Here's the good news. And this doesn't help for storage, but it does help for portability. It includes 2 mounted maps, which are large, and it's in a 4-inch box, which is great. But it also includes an unmounted sort of mini map. It's a half-size map, and on that half-size map is that whole Pacific Islands, Solomon Islands, Bismarck Sea, all that stuff on which you can play a lot of the complete campaign games. So that's really nice, and I'm happy that they included that feature. Now, I'm going to say that it's hard for me to imagine how, and I know Mark says he did it, and he's right, but his box bulges a little bit, and that makes me unhappy. It's hard to see how you could get all the stuff back in the box organized in a really efficient way without overpacking it or optimizing it for specific scenarios. Now, if there's a specific scenario or a set of scenarios that you like to play all the time, then that's fine. You can do it that way. And you can absolutely get everything back in the box. You just stuff it all in there. I'm going to end up with a 3D printed solution to this, and I'm not confident I'm going to be able to get it all back in the box, but we will see. I might do the trick of pulling the boards out and putting the boards in a cabinet or something. And in that case, then yeah, I can absolutely get everything in the box very easily. Um, so John Longshore mentions these errata counters in C3I number 36. So there are a number of counter errors in Pacific War, and you can find out exactly what you need to do if you look at the official errata on this. And I do actually agree with John about this, that GMT should be providing the errata counters and not letting Roger do them in C3I and having to pay buy the magazine. I think the magazine's worth your time anyway. And I need to get the new one, not for this. The good news is that the errors on the counters are either irrelevant or they're irrelevant outside the strategic scenario, which even I do not expect to ever play. So I'm not super bunched up about this, but I mean, I think John's got a point here too. Braxis MF says that Cube for me looks like they have a decent storage setup for Pacific. Where yeah, but I think you're going to end up with overcrowded compartments. If you adopt their storage solution for that. Happy to be corrected. Happy to be proven wrong on that. Next up is the game we're playing right now, Last Blitzkrieg, BCS Last Blitzkrieg from Dean Essig and Multi-Man Publishing. Now, on the one hand, this is an early entry, the first entry in the Battalion Combat series. And so there's some rough spots in it as published, almost all of which are taken care of with the new series rules, which you can just kind of backfit into the first 3 games in the series. That's not problematic, except that they've never redone the player aids, which include the terrain effects chart, which includes the old terminology of defensible terrain as opposed to key terrain. That can be confusing. That's not a big deal. You just kind of have to be aware of that. This is a really, really, really good bulge game. It's big, it's meaty. You're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And yet, unless you're trying to two-hand it or solo it, and it actually solitaires. I think this whole series solitaires very well. Without using the chit pull mechanic, by the way. I mean, by all means, use the chit pull mechanic if you want to. It is optional. I don't like it. I aggressively don't like that chit pull mechanic for this system. But yet a lot of people do, so good for them. I am convinced that the reason why our local group hated it when they played it the first time was because they just assumed that was the intention. You were supposed to play with the chit pull, and I don't think it plays nearly as well that way. It is a masterful bulge game. It is a brilliant system. It is a brilliant distillation of a lot of the logistical and command overhead that one might otherwise have to deal with in, say, OCS, down into literally one die roll on an easily memorizable table. So, and no, I disagree with you, John. I think it was a Blitzkrieg for 2 or 3 days. And that's about it. I will say, Paul West, I assume we're now talking about, are we talking about Compass or GMT? So I will, if I'm ordering from GMT, I think we need to get away from the flat rate shipping boxes. And I realize that there are scenarios in which they are economical. And I also realize that there's a factor where you can get the boxes for free from the post office, and that's nice too. But I don't like them. You generally end up paying more for shipping, and you end up with less packaging for, especially in a 3-inch war game box. There's somebody selling case blue somewhere right now that they gave you the flat. They gave us the flat rate shipping. I mean, I know this is going in a flat rate box. There's not enough protection for that for a $750 game. There's not enough protection. I want that thing, and it's shipped in a fucking bank vault. If I'm paying $750 for it, I'll pay you an extra $10 or $15 for shipping. I don't care about that. Don't ship that flat rate. Fuck that. So I have had fairly bad luck getting stuff from GMT, and bear in mind it's going all the way from California here to Ohio. It's shipped via the U.S. Postal Service in flat rate boxes where it ends up caved in. I actually had to have a couple boxes replaced, but which GMT was happy to do. So I switched to the UPS shipping option for them. I'm not sure if anybody else really has the same ability to decide how you're going to ship it, but UPS right now, for at least for that transit, is cheaper. So Steve Parker likes plexi over mounted maps. I completely agree with you, Steve. I think it's more it's a lot more practical for me, right? I'm happy to I'm happy to just put plexi on it. Joe Okabayashi says that the free USPS boxes rarely withstand the stresses of postal transit. Generally speaking, I haven't had a big problem with it, but where it does have create a problem is where it's shipping from Washington or other side of the country, basically, and it's spending another couple days getting kicked around in the back of a post office truck. Then it really shows, and particularly if it's a bigger than 2-inch box, you're going to have a hard time protecting the game inside in that box. So, all right. So moving on, highest endorsement to last Blitzkrieg. Moving on is World in Flames. We have here is pictured the 5th edition, I believe, with the amazing, dramatic, and exceptionally phallic cover. And I'm not sure that Roger noticed it when he put this cover together, but boy, you can't once seen, it cannot be unseen. It is a fantastic game. It is, in my opinion, the definitive worldwide World War II strategic game. Um, so this is true. I use pirate ship. Whenever I'm shipping anything, I use pirate ship. It saves me usually about half the cost of shipping. So just from that, whether it's U.S. Postal Service or UPS or whatever, it's all fine. And I can actually drop off my post office packages at the UPS store, which has better hours than the post office. So, um, so now we're getting comments in the chat, but here it is. Like I said, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. But like I said, despite the giant cock and balls cover, it's a magnificent World War II game. It's quite detailed, but it's not nearly as just dramatically overcooked like a World at War is. I think a World at War is just overdone in an attempt to. There's reasons for this, right? It's driven. Its ongoing development is driven by tournament play to a much greater extent than World in Flames has any consideration for that whatsoever. So the rules bloat and minutia is in not nearly as in evidence in World in Flames. And frankly, I think you can learn how to play World in Flames from reading the rule book. You can't do that with, I mean, if you can, you're smarter than me. If you can do that with a World at War, good luck. I would turn people to, if you don't like World in Flames for some specific reason, I would turn people to the War, Ernie Copley's game from Compass, rather than World at War, which is a fine game, but learning it is just an absolute bitch unless you're learning it with people. So the other thing, Marty says, wallets in flames. Now, certainly at one point there was a proliferation of, I'm not sure that was a word, but in case it was, or proliferation of supplements. This inflames, that inflames, the other thing inflames. And that was a thing that they were doing for quite a while. Okay. The classic or collector's edition cleaned all that up and consolidated all of those extra doodads into a core game, which includes a lot of the extras, and 4 expansions, which basically includes all the rest of the extras. You can order this directly from ADG, or you can order it from Compass. I think you, considering that ADG last I checked has a shipping location here in the US, they ship pretty quickly. And the strength of the US dollar versus the Australian dollar makes this in the current collector's edition, at least at the classic, really surprisingly cheap, considering that you're getting like it's like a 12 by 12 by 5-inch box. It's got 6 mounted maps in it, 4 of which are full size and 2 of which are smaller things. You're getting rules counters, you're getting a lot of stuff. I'm just talking about the classic. I ended up building my way up to the deluxe. I think the deluxe is, even the most serious whiff person, I think, is going to be more than satisfied with the deluxe. The additional stuff is mostly Patent and Flames, American Flames, or hypothetical scenarios that I have very little interest in. I am more interested in Days of Decision, but there are issues integrating Days of Decision 3 into World and Flames Collector's Edition. But other than that, I think this is for me, this is my choice of strategic level World War II games. It's also got scenarios. You just want to play this East Front, you can do that. You just want to play the Pacific, you can do that. You want to start in 42 or 43 or 44, you can do that. So I will say it's not less work setting the scenarios up. It's a high setup game, because you basically have to arrange a separate force pool of each unit type for each country. And chances are that a given country at any given time is going to have somewhere between 25 and 55 different unit types floating around. Some of them are optional. You can ignore them. The divisions, for example, I think you could choose to play with those or not. That's up to you. Some of the optional rules and some of the add-ons, I think, are worth playing with basically every time. I would always choose to play with Planes and Flames, for example, although I might not choose to play with the pilots. I think I'd be inclined to choose to play with the pilots, but that's me. Carl says that he did not like Whiff, but his friends loved it. So that's the other thing about the current edition is you could just get and this is what I was thinking at the time, you could just get the classic and you don't have to deal with any of that other stuff. I agree that if you started tacking on all those extra things, it does feel bloated. I completely agree with that. So there's a couple of different vassal modules for World in Flames, as Eric points out. There's a free, professionally designed and developed one from ADG that you get for free if you buy the game. You can also just buy the vassal module, but why would you do that? You spend $80 more and get the game too. There's also a third-party vassal module that is fairly good, but it's third-party, developed by volunteers, not by the professionals. It's not as good a module, but it includes some things and some options that the official module does not. I actually think I'll point out, as the One True Flem has the 3rd edition. I think every edition of World in Flames is worth your time. I think the final edition was a terrific game. I think you just kind of needed to be careful about adding too much bloat. Jeff Beeler says, is Fatal Alliances included in this pick? No, it is not. However, I have Fatal Alliances, and I haven't had a chance to play it yet. I just picked it up in November, after all. It does look really good. And as Callendale pointed out more than once, I think Whiff actually works very well as a World War I game. You just have to turn some of the dials, and I think it'll work fine. It's possible that Fatal Alliances will hit the table before World in Flames does over here. I mean, I'd be happy to play either one. But it's also kind of a Fatal Alliance is in a sense a pretty good introductory game to World in Flames, because it's less complicated. It's not like super duper stripped down, but it's slightly stripped down. Yes, there are changes between the final edition, or whatever edition it was, 5th edition maybe, that Fatal Alliances 3 was based on, and the collector's edition, but you can easily relearn all that stuff. So I think World in Flames is a great game. If you haven't seen it, Doug over at the Tabletop's Edge is doing a playthrough. Unfortunately, he's only doing like a video a month, and I'm like, Doug, please give me more. I'm dying over here. It's great stuff. He's doing Days of Decision as well, and I think he's up to 1938 last video. It's super duper engaging. I personally, I like having the option of Days of Decision. I would generally choose to play without it personally. I think you're better off either with the built-in political rules or probably with the Politics and Flames political rules. With One True Flame, you can go to AD Australian Design Group. Just Google that, and you'll get to their website. And there's a little panel on the side where you can choose to display in Australian dollars and American dollars. If you change that to look at the price in Australian dollars and then change it over to US dollars, and you'll see that when I bought the collector's edition classic, I want to say it was like $200 Australian. But at the conversion rate at the time, it cost like $120, which seems insanely cheap for a game that's literally the size of a small, like it's like the size of a tombstone. So it's a very, very favorable exchange rate. You can get through Compass as well, like I said, but you might be better off ordering it directly from ADG to take advantage of that exchange rate. And Paul West says 180.26. Is that Australian or US? So 180.26, I still think that's a good, not a good price, but I still think that's not unreasonable for what you're getting in this box, which is a huge game with tons of stuff and mounted boards and blah, 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 and tons of replayability as well. So as John Longshore mentioned, this wasn't a fire, it was a flood, as I recall, that destroyed a lot of their inventory in Australia. So they had to recall some of the inventory that was stored elsewhere. Oh, for deluxe, 180.26 for collector's edition deluxe. So what deluxe is, it's the classic game plus the 4 expansions: Planes in Flames, Ships in Flames, Territories in Flames, Divisions in Flames, that together consolidate all of the options and stuff. All the ships, Planes in Flames itself, Ships in Flames itself has just as many counters as the core game does. It adds that many ships. So that is an incredible price, to be honest. You're getting you're not getting all the expansions because there's like 2 annuals that are still available, plus 3 add-on games. You can get American Flames, which is 1946, Axis invades America. Patton in Flames, which is 1946, Patton goes to war with the Soviets. And Days of Decision, which is 1936, the war can potentially start early with all the politics and stuff like that. Many integration problems between Days of Decision 3 and World in Flames. And I don't want to talk about that because I could get distracted on it. But 113.25 for Classic, that's a very good price for that. You'll get nailed for shipping. I'm sure they'll charge you $30 for shipping, but still, I think that's okay. They do have a warehouse, but I think, like I said, I think they have a warehouse, as I recall, in Michigan. I'm not sure it's a warehouse. I think it's some dude's garage, but I think they may have recalled a lot of their stock back to Australia when the flood in Australia washed their warehouse out into the Pacific Ocean or whatever happened. So, so John Longshore mentions the deluxe set, but if you're looking at the Australian price, it will look terrifying like that. Actually, we're done clipping the Crusades, by the way. All right, next up, moving along, because I could talk about Whiff for the next half an hour, and that's no problem. Fortunately, I will blow through Red Winter, the Soviet attack at some place in Finland I can't pronounce, by Mark Mazicki. This is in the same sequence as Operation Dauntless. This is the more highly regarded of the 2 games, and I think it's the more attractive map of the 2 games. Let me put it that way. I don't like the map for Operation Dauntless. This is a really highly regarded game. This is supposed to get a reprint from GMT. I believe that's on P500. I don't remember where it is in the reprint process, but this is a really highly regarded game. And it sounds, I haven't looked at the scale, but it sounds low level operational. So I'd have to actually check that. And for those interested in the Winter War or the Continuation War or any of the other things that happened up there, this is 1939. So that is Winter War. So this should be an interesting topic for you. Let me put it that way. Next up is a game I have played, The Devil's Cauldron. This is the very first game in the Grand Tactical series from Multi-Man Publishing designer Adam Starkweather. while observing that there's two different versions, there's really three, but we'll simplify here. There's sort of a GTS version 1 and a GTS version 2. The first 3 games in the series were version 1. Starting with the Greatest Day, the fourth game in the series, they switched to version 2, and the execution of that in the Greatest Day itself is pretty clumsy. Um, there are significant differences between version 1 and version 2, such that some of the factors changed and the way the assault system has changed. So you can't really use the first edition pieces to play the second edition game. So and there's general agreement among the GTS folks that second edition is better, and I am inclined to agree with that. That said, there's nothing hugely terminally broken or disastrously wrong with the first edition either. The second edition is just better. So if you do play any of the first 3 games, you are stuck with the first edition rules, unless you want to make your own counters, in which case you're playtesting, which is why MMP didn't do a new version of this updated to the second edition. I feel more intoxicated now than I do after a shot and a Glencairn and a half of scotch, by the way. This is how little beer I drink. This is not incredibly low alcohol, but it's not incredibly high either. So this is a chit pull system. It's based on the old Panzer Command system from Eric Lee Smith and Victory Games. It does a bunch of its own stuff as well. It is a terrific, it's not a great simulation, but it's a lot of fun to play. This is one half of a 2-game set on Operation Market Garden. This covers Nijmegen and Arnhem, and so the northern half, so the 82nd Airborne and British 1st Airborne sectors. It is an incredibly robust package, just like 20 scenarios in here that range in size from the whole campaign all the way down to little tiny mini-map scenarios. There's tons and tons of content in here. This has been out of print for a very long time. It is on the track to get reprinted from MMP, and they said they expect that to happen this year. I'm not sure I believe them, but I hope that they do. I will be delighted if this comes back into print. That is as opposed to redoing the entire 2-game set as one big giant package that probably would have cost $500. That said, I have played the whole thing and it's great. It's just a lot of fun. The maps are also extremely attractive. The counters are fairly attractive too, but the print, something about the print resolution in these first couple games feels off. Part of the problem is that they use they're 5/8-inch counters, so they're oversized counters, but they use a Fraktur font. That's that German Gothic font that was still in use during the war, for some of the German like names and stuff like that. And man, that's a bitch to read even on 5/8-inch counters. So I would not have done that. And in some cases, there seems to be maybe they could have been printed at a higher resolution. But other than that, I got no particular complaints about this game. It plays great. They have not yet reprinted this. It is supposed last word, official word out of MMP was they expect it to happen this year. So Iggy Krichtal asks, how does GTS compare to CSS? I believe Nathan over at Wise Guy History has done a video on that. So if I'm right, I would recommend going and looking at that. They are the same scale. They use the same sort of command point and dispatch point economy, but they differ in a lot of the tactical details. There's more weapon types. There's more fire types in GTS, but CSS has individual support weapons that can be assigned to counters that have their own counter, and then you assign it to another, like a company. So the mechanisms are a little bit different. There are some things I like about one system more than the other system. Generally speaking, I like the fire types in GTS better than the support weapon counters in CSS, but I like the way the wind shit works better in CSS than I do in GTS, where it just goes all the smoke goes away at the end of the turn. So I like the watermark backgrounds on the counters. I don't think that creates a readability problem. I just think it's resolution. It has reached its pre-order number. I just don't know exactly when it's exactly coming. Those watermark counters were used in Where Eagles Dare and in The Greatest Day. I don't recall about Operation Mercury off the top of my head. I have every game in the series except for No Question of Surrender, which probably means I should buy that. but that might be a thing to get after MMP declares their next sale. Marty says that GTS seems to have more interesting topics than CSS. Um, I mean, I agree with this. Not everybody's going to agree with this. I love Market Garden and D-Day, and GTS has both of those things. The Pacific Island campaigns, on the other hand, I think are really interesting. I do think that those may end up being better as solitaire games. Stigler says that he does not like the silly colored dots in the center of the hex to determine terrain type. That's the job of the rest of the map graphics. No, I love that. I love that in this maps. There is never any question about what the terrain type is. And yet the terrain does not have to conform to the hex size. There are still people who will argue about that. In GTS, it's completely clear. Also, they needed to put dots in the centers of the hexes anyway, because that's how you trace line of sight. So, all right. So moving on. I highly recommend it if you can get a copy, and if not, wait for the reprint. And the series is worth looking at. They are mostly very large and expensive games, but we're getting a GTS magazine this year, which is like next in the production queue, actually. So, and that's going to have a small one mapper in it. So that'll be worth, that'll be a great introduction. So here's the frustrating thing. It's going to be, I predict it's going to be a terrific introduction to GTS. It's going to be sold out in a month, and a month after that, it will be going for $300 on the secondary market, and it will never be reprinted by MMP. So that's a little bit frustrating. I'm being slightly pissy about it, but I mean, that's just, that's my expectation. Next up, I haven't played this. This is by Tatsushi Nakamura. I'm probably messing his name up, but Victory Lost, Crisis in Ukraine, 1942 to 43. This is from Multiman. This is part of their international series. This is part of another loose family of games within that international series that handle East Front topics. This is the one that made the list. This is kind of the same territory as we're fighting over right now, A, and B in the Third Winter. And it's a much lighter game. This is one map. It might be one or two counter sheets. It is relatively compact. So Abractus MF says Tetsuya Nakamura. So I guess I didn't screw it up too bad. And Carl Creeder mentions Race to Bastogne, which is, as of this recording, the most recent GTS game. It's two maps and I believe two extensions to the two maps. It's basically a two-map game. And they sorry about that. They meet at the short end, so it's a long map. You can easily get this on a standard folding table. So I don't have a lot to say about this. It looks okay. I don't really like the counter style, but the map looks good. It looks like a nice, relatively easy to play East Front war game that gives you a good sense of, potentially, a good sense of where the conflict was during this period. So moving along. Stonewall Jackson's Way. Now, the cover I've got here is Stonewall Jackson's Way 2, recently reprinted from Multiman Publishing. One of their rare reprints was sold out like that, came back into stock again, sold out like that in literally a matter of days. So I'm not sure what the stock situation on this game is. Mo, thanks for coming back. I'm not sure what Iggy Cricktal, how about that? Very good timing. So this is a fantastic series. This is one of my favorite war game series, Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. So really any of the entries in this series would be good if you want to investigate that. If you want to hear about what the best entry game is, check out the video I did on that. Stonewall Jackson's Way 2, I think Stonewall Jackson's Way 2 is the highest rated game, but any of the games in the series are amazing. So they are also incredibly gorgeous maps. My personal favorite war game maps. I've got extras of the maps just so someday I'll put them on the wall in a frame. This is a great series. The reprints, like the big compendium reprints from MMP, are expensive, but they've got tons of content in them, so that doesn't bother me. We should also be seeing On to Richmond 2 around the middle of the year. I think that the statement of June seems a little optimistic, but I feel like July or August is possible. I think official word says that maybe June, but I'm not sure I take that very seriously. I think August or September is more realistic, but I do think we will see that this year, and I for one cannot wait. It is a magnificent series, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. Um, Liberty Roads. This is from Hexasim. This is a game about the World War II, the Western Front from 1944 to 1945. It is a very highly regarded game. I didn't look up who the designer was on this. Somebody will put it in the chat. It's also a fairly attractive game. I didn't pull up any game images or anything like that. However, the counters, the unit counters, have like these divisional it's a divisional level game, which is by itself is fine. It's on the same approximate scale as the Mighty Endeavor, and the map looks really nice, and it's always nice from Hexasim, right? The components are always nice, but there's an artistic choice made on the counters, which is to have these very large divisional symbols to identify the units. And they're so big that they kind of overwhelm all the other information on the counters. I don't like that counter design for that reason. They aren't ugly per se. It's and the insignias are cool. But it is distracting, and I think not a great aesthetic choice. Otherwise, the game is supposed to be excellent. Now there is a East Front equivalent called Victory Roads as well, which is not as highly rated, but still fairly highly considered. So you might check out that if East Front is a more your jam as well. David Harrison mentions that GCACW provides great overall value for the money. I agree. It's just rather, generally speaking, it's rather a lot of money. But I've never felt stiffed because there's so much content, so much play value in those boxes, right? Even at the price that On to Richmond 2 is at. And remember, I got the originals. Man, I could bust that out tomorrow. But we're going to get a beautiful new treatment of that, plus Grand Takes Command, plus the Petersburg stuff. So I'm really excited about that. So I have heard, as Paul West mentions, that if you order directly from Hexasim, it does not take all that long to get there, which I guess is not a huge surprise. I mean, when I ordered the Cube for Me trays from Poland, it didn't take that long either, and even the shipping costs weren't that expensive. TLDR on where to start with GCACW. The logical place to start at the moment is Hood Strikes North because it's in print. It's relatively inexpensive as MMP product goes, and it is a relatively straightforward campaign. There's not like a lot of extra special rules for the campaign. There's always small scenarios in these things, right? But like in Atlanta is Ours, for example, there's some really elaborate campaign rules for the advanced game in Atlanta is Ours, which are the advanced game in Hood Strikes North is much more straightforward. And that's just not a simplification. That's just the way it is. So moving along, The Civil War at number 6. This is the Eric Lee Smith Classic Civil War from 1983 from Victory Games. This is a seminal game, highly influential on every single other Civil War game that came out since then, in particular on the U.S. Civil War from Mark Simonich, and frankly, I think For the People from Mark Herman. This is a wonderful game with an innovative sort of pulsed initiative activation system. It plays really well. I mean, we've talked about this before with like comparing and contrasting this in U.S. Civil War. And I wish that Patrick from Patrick's Tutorial, not Patrick, but Nathan from Wise Guy History would actually cover this, because then I could direct people to that video. There's reasons why some people prefer the Civil War and reasons why some people prefer the U.S. Civil War. And I don't think any of those people are necessarily wrong. I come in, generally speaking, on the side of U.S. Civil War because I think it's a clear distillation of a lot of the same ideas with more straightforward and faster playing mechanics. But there are things you lose. You lose the Western stuff, which nobody really cares too much about. You lose, however, the dynamic leaders of the Eric Lee Smith Civil War. And that I do feel the lack of in U.S. Civil War. I don't mind playing with the scheduled leaders, but I would like to have it as an option where I could play with the dynamic leaders as well. I'm aware that would slow the game down That's absolutely a consideration. I am aware that it would bring in a host of problems, all of which have been discussed ad nauseum in relation to the Victory Games Civil War, but I would like to have it as an option. Nevertheless, I think both games are still worth playing. The map in this Victory Games version is not beautiful, but it is perfectly functional. And considering that it's 1983, it's really not that bad. The counters are not great. They are very hard to read due to largely to contrast issues. So there is talk of this getting redone by Compass, but I have seen no motion on that whatsoever through official Compass channels. I'll be happy to accept updated information whenever it arises, but until then, it's a wait and see type of thing. The good news is that this was available for years. It was one of Victory Games' absolute mainstays, and you should be able to score a copy of this for under $50 in pretty good condition. It might be have the shit played out of it, but I think this is a bit strong. Jeff Beeler says the U.S. Civil War is a cleaner but more antiseptic than Civil War. I don't know. I don't know that I think that's quite fair. I think U.S. Civil War's got plenty of Civil War flavor. But you are missing the leaders, right? And I think that's like the major element that the Victory Game Civil War has that really does add a lot to the game, for good and bad, that U.S. Civil War lacks. So I think that's fair. Yeah, this is not good. David Harrison ordered Fallen Eagles 2 directly from Hexasim. Shipping time was good to Missouri, but the shipping box was poorly packed, damaging the game box considerably. So I ordered those from GMT, and they arrived no problem. Now, that said, my Rising Eagles Austerlitz game has the map with the print that's flaking off, and I still haven't reached out to Hexasim about that. I really need to. All right, moving on. So this is kind of a stand-in for all of the Great Battles of History games, like our other series entries. But in this case, I would probably be inclined to put this at the top of the ranking list as well. This is SPQR. Pictured here, the original came out in 1992 from GMT. It's the second game in the Great Battles of History series. Roman Republican battles. The first volume, that first version, had 4 battles in it. This thing has something like 25. This is the new deluxe edition, which I want to say is a second or third printing of the deluxe, but it's confusing because there was an SPQR deluxe before that included some other stuff. So the nomenclature on this is pretty murky. But this thing that you see in the picture right now is what you are looking for. But there's 2 different versions of this too, one of which includes the Barbarian expansion and the other of which does not. The more recent printing does include Barbarian, and Barbarian includes like 9 more battles. So there's a lot of really good content in here. Great Battles of History is a detailed but not overwhelming system. You do need to kind of play it and get the hang of it. But it is a great ancients system. I'm aware that the series has handled non-ancient topics as well, but it never really took off for non-ancient topics, and that's really where the heart of this thing lies. One of the interesting thing that Great Battles of History does is it shows you sort of the interactions of different doctrines and tactics and weapon systems of the periods as they interacted at the time. That is one of the things that goes away if you go with simple Great Battles of History, which again, I don't consider all that much simpler than the regular Great Battles of History. It plays a little faster, and it's more unified across multiple games, but I don't care about that. I'd rather have the full richness of the system. I don't consider the system to be overwhelming. So let's see here. Paul West says that only reason he ordered through Hexasim is that Liberty Roads wasn't available in the States. So GMT didn't have it, or was that a reprint, or what was going on with that? I mean, normally GMT carries all of Hexasim stuff. So Iggy Krichtal is playing Alexander at Compass Spring. I think I'm saying no to Compass Expo in spring. I think my problem is that like all the conventions are front loaded from January to June, all the ones I go to, right? So the first half of the year is really congested with conventions. So So I decided I was just going to not go in May, which remember is like a month away, man. It'd be like 2 weeks after BGF. I really want some and then Origins is a couple weeks after that. So I'm fine with waiting till November. I will be at Compass, probably at Compass Expo in November. So I'll just wait till then. So Abraxas MF. So it's an interesting comment. He says that he didn't find GBOH to be much more difficult to learn than Men of Iron. There are some underlying ideas, although the games aren't that similar as such. There are some underlying ideas that underlie both systems, and Men of Iron is generally cleaner, so it's a great avenue into great battles of history. Paul West, thanks so much. Much appreciated. LB Liberty Roads, I think we're talking about, was out of print at the time. Gotcha. Thank you so much for the support. Much appreciated. Drive safe. So I'll mention this. Alistair Logie points out the number of counters in SPQR. I think there's more in here than in Julius Caesar. I haven't counted, so that may not be accurate, but it's certainly comparable. You're going to have a problem fitting it all back in the box. Right now, mine is baggy, which I hate bagging counters like this. It's very difficult to find everything. So I would much prefer to use 3D printed trays, which are coming along right now. Because I can't change the print disc over, I can. It's just an extra hassle. I'm just running drawer organizers on the printer for the next couple of days. So So SPQR is number 5. What are we doing on time? We're doing pretty good. We're going to not spend too much time on the top 5. Somebody's going to be disappointed, though. Number 4 is Space Empires 4X. This is a great game. There are cards, but the cards are limited to one of the expansions, or both of the expansions in this case. This is the only sci-fi entry on this list. This is Jim Crone design, 2011 release. It's been reprinted a couple of times now. There are 2 expansions out. There's a third and last one coming. It is a terrific game. You do have to have some willingness to put up with paperwork. It's not a ton of paperwork, but there is some paperwork. And yeah, you can spreadsheet it if you want. I don't think that's really necessary here. For Fed and Empire, yeah, by all means, run it through Excel. But this is I think, a magnificent game. It's pretty easy to play. To me, it reminds me a lot of Stellar Conquest, which I played in the Avalon Hill version back in the day, which did have a sort of feel that you were keeping track at the bowling alley sort of feel to it. There's a little bit of that here. I don't mind that, though. So I like that. This is a terrific game. It is also super duper solitairable. You can easily just multi-hand it, no problem. But there are also a variety of different solitaire scenarios. There's the Doomsday Machine scenarios and the Alien Empire scenarios, and the last expansion is going to include consolidated rule and scenario books. So you'll have all that stuff under one cover and you won't have to search around for it. Space Empires 4X, I think, is a terrific sci-fi war game. It's a straight war game, but it's also very much a 4X game. It's got all 4 of the X's, unlike, say, Twilight Imperium, which only has like 2 or 3 X's. Number 3 is Unconditional Surrender. Remember, these aren't my top 25. These are BGG's top 25 as seen through the lens of me. Unconditional Surrender. This is a Salvasta game from 2017, World War II in Europe. This game was extremely well received, and I think for good reason. It's got a number of really interesting things going on. People did complain about the map projection that was chosen to do the map. I don't think that's a serious problem, and I don't think any of those people know anything about map projections. It's a really good choice of map projections. It's just Scandinavia looks weird because you're not used to seeing it in that projection. But it's a more accurate representation of the land area of Scandinavia than you get in the standard map where it's super distorted. So there's a kind of a single unified combat mechanism in Unconditional Surrender that you use for land combat, sea combat, air combat, strategic warfare, all that stuff. It's really neat. It's also got that really great puzzle-like quality that I really like. You move one unit at a time. You have to like pay to activate units, and then you move one unit at a time, and you can You can fight during the move or prepare for an attack at the end of the move. Um, maybe it's an either or thing. It might be an either or thing. But you've got a lot of flexibility in terms of how you execute your operations. There are two issues with it that I see. One is that it does take a while to play. It's a fairly slow moving game because of the way that mechanic works. Because of that, you're moving one unit at a time. You have a pool of points for the unit. It's movement points, right? You spend movement points to attack. So I move, spend a couple movement points to attack. Then I keep moving and do some other stuff. That takes a while to get through. This is like a 40 or 50-hour game. And I really feel like it's more comfortable at a 20-hour game, but it just isn't. It's not that kind of game. Um, if you want that experience, maybe you check out Unconditional Surrender Case Blue, which is a mini game that appeared in a C3I magazine. That's actually really good and probably the best showcase for this mechanic. I do think this is a very strong game. And I also think, however, that the diplomatic side of the game doesn't really hold together very well. It is relatively easy, for example, for Italy to end up as one of the allies, as that is less historically outlandish than you may think, but it will totally screw up a World War II game. So not a great choice, and a lot of the other diplomatic mechanisms work out in a fairly ineffectual way, I think. But like the basic like beat to beat gameplay of unconditional surrender is, I think, really really strong. Number 2 is Holland 44. This is the top Mark Simonich entry. This is the Operation Market Garden one. All of these games are outstanding. Again, this is a game family rather than a series as such. They're all relatively similar, but they're not quite similar enough to have a series rulebook and all that stuff. This is Operation Market Garden. It's on like 1.5 maps. Again, long way, so you can easily get this on a regular table. There are setup cards, so there's a little bit of off-map overhead, but not that much. This plays really well. It plays fairly quickly. You could easily play this in a long afternoon. It is. I've seen people complain about the balance, but I've seen people complain about the balance from both sides. Oh, the Allies can't win. Oh, the Germans can't win. No, the Allies can't win. No, the Germans can't win. So that to me says that the balance is actually okay. I think this is a terrific game in a terrific series. I have often spoken that these are terrific. The Zoc bond mechanic itself, I'm a little surprised that there's been one or two other things that have picked up on that, but very few other designers have tapped into that. I did build this off of BGG's list. I again, seen through me, right? I made the call as to what was getting included and what wasn't, and GBACW was just not high enough. I suspect that the highest rated GBACW game, I'm happy to be proven wrong. I haven't looked this up. That the highest rated game is probably Death Valley. That's my guess. So Holland 44, it's terrific. Take a look at it. And number 1, surprising absolutely no one, is Advanced Squad Leader. First published in 1985 by Avalon Hill, moved on to Multi-Man Publishing after that. With the demise or the sale of Avalon Hill to Hasbro for 67 cents and a pork sandwich. So, I'm going to have something to say about what Stu was talking about here in a second, but we'll cover ASL very briefly because this thing needs no introduction from me, right? This is probably the single most popular straight Hex Counter war game out there, and it is a monolith of astonishing complexity. Not as much as people think, but it's still very complicated and very fussy and quite expensive to participate in, considering if you want to, unless you're happy to just have a couple of things and just play those, in which case, great, you're smarter than the rest of us. It is a terrific cover. This is a Roger McGowan cover as well, obviously. So we've said more than enough about ASL here. So I don't know that we need to go into enormous detail, but if we look at using the criteria that I gave you, which is hex map, no cards, no blocks, no miniatures, no point-to-point, no areas, this is the top-rated war game. And it's less testicular cover than World in Flames, so that's nice too. So let me touch on what Stigler was saying here, because I think this is an interesting point. So here's the thing, and I'll agree with the statement that we wargamers are not that well represented at Board Game Geek. I think that's obviously true. I don't think anybody here is going to argue with me about that. Whose fault is that? Is that BGG's? Is that the Carcassonne players at BGG for having a place where they're happy hanging out, playing the latest whatever it is Euro that they're doing? Or is it our fault for giving that ground up? Right? BGG or any other site works off of basically community investment. Okay. And I'm not talking money wise, although they do have funding drives and stuff like that. But there's a lot to do and engage in on Board Game Geek that you don't have to shell out dollars for. Okay. The best thing that we can, well, I don't want to say the best, but if we want to, BGG is unquestionably a tremendous resource for things like information and photos and videos and all that stuff. If we want to make it better for wargamers, then we wargamers have to go there and engage with wargame stuff. Okay. I know a lot of people prefer Consim World, and I'm a little bit sympathetic to that, but the interface on Consim World is so primitive that anybody that's not that hasn't literally been using it since 1998 or whenever it started goes there for the first time today and immediately closes that browser tab and goes back to Board Game Geek, because it is a terrible, outdated interface that John probably can't change due to either lack of time to do the work or lack of willingness to deal with the inevitable flaming pushback that he gets every time he suggests updating that site. He tried to do kind of a soft update with the social site, but frankly, not that many people post on that. So, wargamers are always going to be outnumbered by hobby gamers, but the only people who can improve the quality of wargaming representation and participation on Board Game Geek is us. We are the folks that have, we the wargamers are the folks that have to do that. And largely, there's exceptions. There's always the Nimrod Raider, the Mad Raider on Board Game Geek. But by and large, it's wargamers that rated the wargames, right? But don't forget that the number of ratings factors into their calculus too. So something like Gloomhaven's got, I don't know, 2.8 million ratings. I mean, that's probably a factor. And I suspect that's why I think Gloomhaven is the number one game now instead of Twilight Struggle. Twilight Struggle, as much as we like to argue about whether it's a war game or not, is one of ours, okay? And it was number one on Board Game Geek for a long time. So if you are used to the Consim World interface, then okay, but you're not going to attract additional people with that interface to that site, right? It's a good resource site for those who were already invested in it, but it's a bad face for wargaming. Let me put it that way. And Board Game Geek is a better face for wargaming. And tabletop war games are tabletop board games, right? So we have allies over there, right? They're not trying to bone wargamers as a policy matter. I mean, there are probably individual people, I hate war games. Those people are warmongers. But they're generally trying to be helpful and help out as a general policy thing. They are still, after all, multiple. I wouldn't be shocked if a wargame podcast won best podcast, and that's not limited to wargame podcasts. E-Creek says Gloomhaven is not number one now. It's Brass Birmingham. I have no idea what that even is. Is that the one with Abraham Lincoln on the cover? I don't know anything about that. The BBS is calling and wants its format back. That is exactly right. We're seeing more of that. We're also seeing a general migration to Discord, which has a lot of upsides. I like Discord as much as anybody, but it also by definition silos everybody. So if Lock and Load has a Discord, I assume they do. Lock and Load has a Discord. People that like are GMT people are not going to wander into that Discord accidentally and stumble across something that they might otherwise like. You kind of need an invite to get into the Discord. Maybe that's easy to find and maybe it's not. So those Discord servers are all like individual communities that don't really have a lot of connection or interaction between them. And this is what Abraxas MF is getting after here when he says that Discord is really fragmented. Absolutely correct. I've never watched Kilroy. I've never actually watched that show. I may have seen a couple of clips on it. I have, oh my God, I'm in like 200 Discord servers. I have to mute every one of them, except for like mine and one other one at a time. Speaking of which, there's a link to the Discord server in the video description. So check that out if you'd like to experience Discord for the first time. All right. So we are going, and there's also Facebook too, right? And Facebook is a modern interface. Whether you think that's good or bad, it's up to date, right? So we are right out of time, actually. So it's actually worked out pretty well. I went through the 25 and had about 5 minutes to rant at the end. So that actually worked out very well. So we do have the show with Dan tomorrow, which may or may not have a special guest. I'm waiting on confirmation on that, which may have come in during the show, but we'll see. We'll have somebody, even if it's just me and Dan. So, but that's 7:30 tomorrow. Tomorrow also at 10 a.m. Eastern is the return of Traveler Tuesday. We'll have a special look at an upcoming, it's not even upcoming, I think it's launching tomorrow, Kickstarter for Traveler. So check that out. Don't forget the Traveler Mayday thing, which is linked in the video description, as well as Connections Online, which is also linked in the video description. That's the only reason Brant was here tonight, was to yell at me to mention Connections Online, except that I had already thought of it. And Mo and I are hosting a thing on Connections on, I believe that's on Thursday evening. I'd have to keep having to check the schedule. I have no recollection of having had the conversation in which I agreed to participate in that, by the way. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I just don't remember it at all. So on Thursday, we also have an unboxing, which is, what am I unboxing this week? I don't remember, but there's an unboxing this week. That got uploaded a couple of days ago. So we are, a little bit above the average video release schedule for recently. So, hoping to improve that. And hopefully by this time next week, we will be streaming off the new computer and that will all be set up and working. And I just did all this configuration in OBS that I now have to redo it all. I can export the profile, but I have a hunch that it's going to require a lot of extra work. So I've got an enormous backlog of unboxing videos to go through. So we really have to get through those. All right, folks. So let me give you a final number here on our maximum concurrence, which looks like it was about 167, looks like, which is a pretty good number. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We will be back next week, barring technical challenges. If nothing else, I'll go to Starbucks or something and have a announcement. So I'll be on at 8, one way or the other. But don't be shocked if the video quality is a little bit lower. So I would like to thank everybody for coming by. Thanks for your support. Don't forget that you can like the video to show your support for the channel. You are also supporting the channel by being here and participating in the chat. Subscribe if you have not already subscribed. There's a link to the Patreon in the video description. Blah, blah, blah. You guys all know that already. So until next time, I wish everybody a great night, and we'll see you all either tomorrow or next Monday.